All right, well, I appreciate the opportunity to come up here on behalf of Mr. Welch, who is the PAE, or Program Acquisition Executive for Command and Control and Counter Command and Control. So we're our own worst enemy. We fight ourselves as much as we can. So I'll kind of talk to you a little bit about if I go ahead, next slide, a little about the role of the PAE for C2 and Counter C2, hopefully provide some context on how we relate to the other PAEs, and then give you a little bit of insights into the three CPEs that fall underneath Mr. Welch's portfolio. So my name is Ward Roberts. I am the Assistant CPE for C2IN. So I'm really focused on the C2 portfolio, but hopefully I'll give good justice to the ISW and the ST3 portfolios. And anything I can't get right, I'll call on Neff to give me the answers from the Intel portfolio. So, all right. So really the vision, the portfolio perspective is establishing a capability that provides the commanders with the information they need at the point they need to be decisive on the battlefield. It is the culmination of what is the C2 function out of Fort Leavenworth, the Intel functions out of Fort Huachuca, and then the STRI guys down in Orlando cover a large gambit of the training environment from ranges on post-camps and stations all the way up to the fancy simulators we use for the combat vehicles. Okay, next slide. So I think a lot of conversation today, especially with the DUSA starting out, and then I think all of the CPEs have hit it so far. Acquisition reform and the Army Transformation Initiative really changed how we did business. It changed how we did requirements. We had a lot of conversations earlier about little r and big R requirements and how we changed acquisition. In the early days, when I switched over to acquisition before I took the uniform off, we spent a lot of time writing requirements. And then we took a lot of time analyzing the requirements, a lot of time building the solution to that requirements, and then we spent 10 years delivering a 10-year-old product, and nobody likes that. So the fundamental change in how we're doing business is, instead of trying to drive an Army definition of what is next, and then an Army requirement what's next, is switch to commercial first. So fundamentally, applying industry best practices, industry's innovation, especially in the world of IT, to an Army solution. So commercial first. Now, what does that mean? Is the challenge of using commercial first in the military workplace. So soldiers will find anything and they will break it. If you give them a bar, they will bend it. If you give them a piece of glass, they'll break it. So applying commercial solutions to the warfighter is not just give me the same thing I can buy at Best Buy. I don't mind trying it, but the aspect of applying commercial to this footprint is taking what is commercial from a guts perspective, so the CPUs, the processors, those kind of things, and helping me turn it into a form factor that I can give to a soldier that he won't break. That could be ruggedization by a case or something like that. So when I say commercial first, I don't want to develop technology, but I do need to apply the technology to the soldier. The other aspect is, I kind of mentioned, we spent in the early days of then C3T 10 years developing the old WIN-T program, which was a satellite communications, which when it was conceived was awesome. It was going to bring, connectivity to the world down to the battalion level. Well, we built it. Industry kept going. We stopped developing him, and we were planning to give that same thing to the Army for almost 20 years. It is still the primary system the Army is using for communications. So every other week I get an email from Elon asking me to join Starlink for my home internet service provider. So that is out there at scale, and yet our solution for the warfighter is still a geosynchronous SATCOM dish that's the size of a truck. It requires 5 or 6 guys to operate, and all the soldiers going out and they're going to Best Buy and they're buying that Starlink terminal from Best Buy. So the intent here is to switch from that old model to the new model to rapidly field and do tech refreshes. So fundamentally, our principle now is we're going to try to abide by best practices, field the Army with the best capabilities we can within 5 years, and then come back to them every 5 years to refresh that technology. So we're not trying to use 5-year technology to process all the cool AI tools your guys are given. Next Gen C2 is the specific piece of technology that allows me to enable the Joint Force by giving commanders down to the company level access to data, to ability to generate or to move the sensor feeds that are being generated up to the enterprise to be consumed, and then use that information to make good decisions. So that's our contribution to enabling the Joint Force. And I heard somebody earlier mention CC2, which is an acronym I hate. So the other aspect we've done is what used to be the tactical network and the enterprise network was a very distinguished boundary between what we on the warfighting side did versus what the enterprise did. Fundamentally now, everything we're doing in the aspect of Next Gen C2 and all the AI tools we're doing, they're all in the cloud. So access to the cloud, or in our world, we would call that the enterprise network, the persistent environment that exists whether you're there or not. A big change. We fought in the old days, we put a server stack on every vehicle, and that's all they operated was on that local server stack. So a fundamental change to that thing. So the other thing we've also tried to do is within the training portfolio is we used to have bespoke systems for operating a system, and we had bespoke tools for training the system. You would train on something, then you would go use a different tool to operate on it. So this fact that we're moving to a data-centric environment allows us to use the same tool for operating as we do for training by just pushing the data into that same tool. In the concept of requirements, we've really talked about the capability need statement. The characteristic of need for next-gen command and control was the first characteristic need statement coming out of the Army. Set the vision at the strategic level for where we wanted to go, but gave us a lot of latitude underneath that. So we've been building out in the portfolio. Mr. Welch is working on EMSO-CON, which will bring the electronic magnetic spectrum operations perspective to the CON, and then linking those documents together so that the generation of data and the consumption of data and the moving of data are all linked together from a requirements perspective. In the world of S&T, in the old days, we used to have a lot of R&D money from the Army trying to do IRAD equivalent development. As I kind of mentioned, we were never very good at it. We were never faster in industry, so we did a lot of work that was either duplicative or redundant with what the industry was doing. So now S&T for us is more about integration and understanding the technology than it is trying to develop it. There's still some things that are unique to the government that most industry doesn't do. I don't know many civilian companies who do electronic warfare. So there's still some things we're going to have to develop on our own, but primarily the purpose of S&T and inside this portfolio is integration of technologies and evaluation of technologies. There was a bit of a rhetoric going on in the early days of Next Gen C2 that we were Army only and U.S. only. I think that rhetoric has been broken. I think we're realizing now, again, the solution is data-centric. We can shape the data to be shared with our joint and multinational partners using the data model, not using bespoke internet sections. So looking at what that means, interesting enough, the multinational partners are looking at the same problems we have. They're trying to move to a data center operations and struggling through the same things we're struggling through on how to implement that at scale. A little bit behind us, they're looking for us from a leadership perspective. So as an industry opportunity, everything I'm telling you about what we're doing inside the C2 and counter C2 portfolio, you can go to the UK and talk to those guys. They have the exact same problem. You go to Australia, exact same problem. So they're looking for us from an Army perspective or land component perspective on driving where we're going. And then the last piece, which has been the most innovative for me, trying to break out of the red tape bureaucracy I grew up in, is the idea of communicating better with industry and then encouraging industry to do industry engagements. Right now in the concept Next Gen C2, we have 2 team leads, Team Andrew, Palantir, and about a dozen other companies working with 4th ID and General Ellis's team, and then the Lockheed Martin, RAF guys out in Hawaii working with the 25th ID team with General Bartholomew. So understanding the power that industry can have when they talk to each other versus me trying to figure out the right question, tell my prime, who then tells the sub, it almost never works and it's never timely. So trying to communicate what we need to industry and then encourage industry to work with other industry partners to bring those solutions to us. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So I mentioned the 2 prototyping formations in the world of Next Gen C2, but also in the warfighting world, several events going on this year, which are really kind of the capstone of our prototyping efforts. So I think of FY25 is we had a good idea, we've now built it at scale, now we're giving it to a commander to operate at scale. So when General Ellis goes out to the National Training Center, there'll be 3 corps over him, and then the majority of his division will be out in the dirt using the Next Gen C2 ecosystem. So the first time at that scale, and when I say scale, in that division, about 400 LEO terminals, about 350 edge compute devices, edge servers, operating at both the secret and unclassified level, about 5,000 radios, about 67 different private 5G instances. So a lot of kit at scale will be out in the dirt there at National Training Center. So this year, really, the near term is getting through those prototyping, proving out that the idea is what we want. We're never going to have the final answer, but the intent is to use the near term to shift towards scaling the Army fast. So in the world of C2, two things we're focusing on near term to get at scale. One, 30 months, no more than that, divesting of all that old Win-T stuff I told you about. It was conceived in the 80s, built in the 90s, delivered in the 2000s, and it's still out there. Nobody wants to use it, but it's still on their books. They're still having to maintain it, and they're spending their dollars. So mandate from the chief was, well, he tried to get us down to 24 months. We said best we could do is 30. He said, okay. And every time he sees Mr. Welsh, he's like, 30 months, we're down to 26 months now. But anyways, trying to divest of that legacy equipment. The second is to start to field the same capabilities we provided General Ellis at 4th ID and General Bartholomew at 25th to the Army. So next year, FY27, we'll be delivering the full stack Next Gen 2 capabilities to a core headquarters, retouching the 25th ID to bring them up to the hardware standards we've agreed upon, and then touching a couple other units in FY27. So this goes to scale starting in 27. And then the Army's intent is 3 division equivalent units per year. So in my lifetime, 26 years in the Army, and then 6 years now as an Army civilian, never seen that pace. In the early days, we were doing 2 or 3 brigade combat teams a year. Now I'm doing 3 division equivalent of formations works per year. And then the long term is, this is not a fielded and done. And no aspect of this portfolio are we ever actually done. Every time we go to a unit, every year we're going to be looking at evolving to the next piece of technology, because nobody wants an iPhone 13. Everybody wants an iPhone. We'll be on 17 now. And next year, they're going to want the 18. And then after that, they're going to want the 19. If I applied the old model, I'd still be fielding, I don't know, Motorola flip phones or something like that. So the aspect of long-term is never to field and then sustain. The aspect of long-term is to field and continuously refresh it with the most current technology. And then in the midterm there, the other aspect of shifting from midterm to long-term is we're going to tailor the capabilities we provide to the formation based upon how that commander fights. So what the I-Corps commander is going to want to fight in the Pacific is not the same thing the 5th Corps commander needs to fight in Europe. So we need to tailor the capabilities. So at the foundation, at the data layer, we need to be interoperable, but the capabilities they need from those different sides of the ocean are different kind of capabilities. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's my sweet spot of portfolio. So hopefully I don't go too fast on this. We'll be around to answer lots of questions. Oh, go back one. Oh, I went too far, okay. All right, so fundamentally the aspect of C2IN is to provide the commander data at the pace he needs it and where he needs it on the battlefield. All the rest of the gobbledygook, mildly important, but our whole purpose, the why we exist, is to provide the commander the data he needs and the tools he needs to understand that data to apply his warfighting needs. So the top left-hand corner, I will caveat, foot stomp, beat on it a little bit. Nobody in this room is going to sell me Next Gen C2. But I can't tell you how many times a vendor will come up to me and say, hey, I want to sell you some of my Next Gen C2. I have the answer for Next Gen C2. And I'll say, no, you don't. You have an aspect. You have a tool we can apply to the ecosystem of Next Gen C2. And I think that's been a trend so far. The Army's looking at architectures as the way to define capabilities, not buy me a solution, not hire a solution out, but look at the ecosystem, define the standards, provide APIs so an industry understands what they can do, where they can plug into the architecture, and then bring me your solution. Tell me where you fit in that architecture is what I would ask of you. So you would ask me, why is there a picture of a cannon on the front page of the C2IN brief? Because that's fundamentally the first time the Army did end-to-end digital fires using containerized applications and modern data standards. That was 4th ID firing AXS. I guess that was early February, I think it was. Yeah. Oh, the first shot, 15th September, check. I'm not sure what the actual photo was, but that's the significance of showing that, because, again, me doing data for data's perspective is mildly interesting to the data scientists in the world, but in the end, what I want my data tools to provide that staff sergeant running that gun team the data he needs to pull that lanyard the moment the commander says yes, and all the back-end tools he needs so the commander can make good decisions to get him that data quickly. So the diagram on the right is kind of where we talked about the stack. I think somebody mentioned earlier, fundamentally starting at the bottom, transport agnostic. Nothing in the ecosystem should require any particular specific waveform, radio, line of sight, beyond line of sight, doesn't matter. They're all just tools to move data around the battlefields. I move up the stack a little bit, I hit the infrastructure, so to me, I just call that the compute layer. It is the both edge and cloud compute capability. It's the network infrastructure, routing, switching, et cetera. Using a software-defined networking approach to make sure that transport is agnostic. I move up to the data layer. This is the sweet spot of Next Gen C2. In the old days, we used heavy applications. I say old days. Today, If you weren't part of those two divisions, you're still using a heavy compute. All the data is on each application. This box and that box on the same desk don't share data unless they send a message between each other. Some pretty archaic standards to do that. They existed for a good reason, but they are definitely not the best practice for how industry does data today. So that's the sweet spot of where we're at for next-gen C2. And then on the top of that is applications. Fundamental commanders should never have to worry about the bottom 3 layers. A commander should only have to worry about the top layer. Small portion of the Army will work on the bottom half of the bottom 3 layers, but those should be transparent to him. I want a commander using the application to run through his workflow to make his decisions faster. I don't want him to have to worry about anything below that. The intent is the applications are not unique to anybody. They could be a different application for I-Corps and different application for 5th Corps to do the exact same function, whatever the commander uses. I love to use the Waze versus Google analogy. They both provide navigation. They both look at the same map to get you there. They're all pulling traffic data from the same basic sources. So in the end, it's whatever you prefer. So that's really the intent. Put the commander at the application level. Let him use those tools. Let him customize those tools to how he wants to do business. Okay? Next slide. I didn't realize this was in there, but an example. So kind of put some pieces of the puzzle. I got great pictures for the hardware. I don't have great pictures for the software, so they're all listed in there. You are welcome to go to look at these. Take a picture. To kind of give you that bubble in the middle, C2 now, that's where I was talking about the divestment that went to. You get some of the compute and transport out there to enable access, and then all the rest of it is going to get built out around that infrastructure. Okay. Next slide. All right. In the CPE ISW, formerly IEWS, is fundamentally the aspect of the Army's. Let me make sure I get this right. Understanding of how the commander can see himself and he can see the enemy to make decisions better. So all the aspects that were still in the old IEWS portfolio are still there. Offensive and defensive cyber tools, the electronic warfare, electronic attack, electronic support aspects are all still there. The intelligence analysis tools, Titan, AIDP, those all tools are all there. And then finally, the space support activities. So fundamentally, a lot of relationship between the C2 portfolio and the counter C2 portfolio, even though we're counter to each other. No pun intended there. Fundamentally, looking at the approach of an architecture, thing I mentioned earlier, of aligning the capabilities to move data around the battlefield versus the capabilities to do the analysis. And then the interesting part that's kind of exploding from our perspective is the ability to both generate the data at the edge from a sensor perspective, but then move it around the battlefield. You know, I've heard the analogy of using the Internet of Things. So my doorbell, my Ring camera, my camera sections, my refrigerator are all talking to me. At some point, we'll have, I say some point, in 4th ID, we will have the capability at the company commander level to move data at significant speed and latency. So we can now move that data from the edge, either process it at the edge or move the exploitation back to the enterprise. Okay, next slide. Some focus things for the CPEISW, and probably most important to you guys is the URL there at the end for vulcan-soft.com to look at some of the upcoming opportunities for their portfolio. Interesting things, time closely with is the assured PNT. Some interesting aspects in the world of CMOS, or Modular Open Suite of Standards, to provide hardware applications to integrate quickly on vehicles, shift hardware without having to replace entire boxes. Okay. All right, let me keep going. Next slide, please. In the portfolio down in Orlando and General Beeler, they still run all of the Army's training apparatuses. I did not realize until I was preparing for this conversation. Go ahead and hit the next slide. The amount of things that this portfolio touches is significant. The places where this portfolio touches is significant. All of the training ranges, every rifle range and every post was originally built by this office. Every simulator they touch for Bradley gunnery qualification, tank gunnery qualification comes from this office, as well as the large-scale brigade, division, corps-level warfighting simulation system command here, most specifically with the next-gen constructive being the newest aspect of that. And then next slide. All 3 of us listed out there, how to get a hold of any one of us. Either that, or you can just track me down and shoot me a note, and I'll either answer your question or point you to the right guy. So with that, take a snapshot of the picture. I think the intent is to post these slides so you guys can look at them. Feel free to look through them, some of the details. I'd like to bring up Drew and then Danette. If you guys can come join me on the stage, we kind of shift from hearing me talk to hopefully answer a few questions, and Gordon's going to give us the hard questions, and we'll go from there. All right. I'll use two.
Good afternoon, everyone. I did come with some hard questions. So just a quick introduction to myself. Gordon Kim. I'm a graduate school, business school here student, also under the Gordon Knott Center, one of the students that are interested in entrepreneurial pathways within the national security realm. So my questions, hopefully, are the questions that you guys have as well. So we'll just go do a round of introductions for the ones that haven't been up on stage yet.
Hi, everybody. Danette Rose, if you haven't met me. I'm currently the Deputy Director for Army Fuse. I'm working with Dr. Willis. But I did spend the last 7 years with the C5 ISR Center, specifically with the Prototype Integration Facility. So a little bit of background there, and what used to be PEO C3T prior to that.
Drew Conover from First Corps. I spoke earlier on one of the panels this morning. One thing I would say before we get into the questions is the two divisions that are building the prototype for next generation command and control, the 4th Infantry Division and 25th Infantry Division are both inside of First Corps. So we are super interested in the capability that they're building. And then also at the Corps level, we will onboard the prototype next year along with one of our other divisions also based out of Joint Base Lewis McChord.
Awesome. So I spent a lot of my time in the PACOM AOR as a Green Beret, so C2, especially in the first island chain, is a big issue of ours, right? So Mr. Roberts, for the companies in the room who aren't already embedded in the NGC2, what is the most realistic pathway to get their products still in front of the Army?
So as I kind of mentioned in the opening speech here, I think the intent is to evolve. The intent is to ask the commanders as we shape the conversation for future years where their focuses are. We've got a conversation coming up in the June timeframe with I-Corps to understand what Next Gen C2 means to them. So two things will come out of that. We'll get a demand signal from the command on where they need us to focus, and then we'll use that to communicate out to industry what the gaps are. I think the intent is to always continuously be looking for new technology, not be wed to saying, I have to keep using this one solution because I bought it last year. My job as an architect guide is to say, this is where I'm going to make it work if it's not the same thing. But I think the opportunity as we move forward is us communicating to that, those links I showed on the previous slide, how to get a hold of us, understanding what's in the marketplace, and then communicating our needs back to marketplace. So whether it's an application, eventually we'll build out a CI/CD pipeline, the intent being at the IL2 environment so that industry can build applications on top of our environment. And then from a hardware perspective, is continue to use the CSOs, as Chris talked about, to continually evaluate what industry has available. So.
There, a follow-up question. If the startups in here, their current partners are not 4FID or 25ID, should they continue to partner with them if they have a C2 product?
So never going to tell you no, but I'll also tell you you're not constrained there. So it's very easy if you already have a relationship with either Anduril or Lockheed as the two team leads for those two products. But no constraints if you don't. If you're a little bit less mature, you're going to be coming out next year, then call me up, tell me what you got. Let me make sure I'm tracking where you want to go. And then we'll find ways to either evaluate you or get you in the marketplace to see what's available for opportunity. So, but yeah, no constraints if you don't have a relationship. If you're not already one of their picked vendors, you're not already the solution that's going to 25th, the intent is not to hold back on their, transport's agnostic, compute's generally agnostic, and then at the point of applications, any application works, so there's plenty of opportunities.
Thank you, sir. Colonel Conover, there's a lot of talk about pushing decision-making to the edge. What does that mean? What does it actually mean to you in your perspective? And what has the Army done well to enable that or needs to do well to actually answer that challenge?
Yeah, I think, when we talk about decision-making in general in the Army, I think the Army has the exact same problem that every company or business has right now, and that is, if you want to win, you've got to operate, faster than your opponent. You've got to make quality decisions, at a pace that's much, much faster than what we've been doing before. And so automation, autonomy, those are requirements. They're absolute requirements. And so the same things that, that companies are putting in place to help them see themselves and make good decisions at the right time are the same capabilities that we need in the Army. So we're making some progress with NGC2, but there is a long way to go, and there is just all kinds of opportunity out there. So right now, I mean, NGC2 is not just transport and network architecture, but it's also automation and a little bit of autonomy. And so when I say autonomy, I mean putting AI agents into parts of what we call the operations process to start doing functions that soldiers normally would have performed, so that we're able to do it faster and more accurately than we're currently able to do. And so we're starting to see some of that inside of NGC2, but there is just a long way to go. And so there is a tremendous amount of opportunity there, and we need it. And so the same things that companies are starting to put in place, that's what we need in the Army. I would say there was one other thing on that. Yeah, I would just say one other piece that I'd highlight in particular is, that I've been talking about a lot, kind of everywhere I go, and it's really the idea of a decision support tool. So inside of NGC2, we're automating the targeting process, the kill web, whatever you want to call it. But the broader decisions that have to be made throughout an operation, there's conditions associated with those decisions. And those conditions are based on ourselves, what we call friendly conditions, but then there's also conditions based off what our opponent is doing, what the terrain, and given the terrain and the weather. And so there's just a lot of different things out there. But the ability to connect sensors to those conditions to generate live data, and from that data on those conditions, automating the process of providing recommendations of whether we go left, right, or center based off those conditions. I think that is another one that if we can get that right, that'll be a game changer. And I know there's some companies out there talking about it, working on it, but that idea is applicable at so many different levels. I think it'll look qualitatively different at the depending on what level you're at, but I mean, that is an absolute game changer and certainly something that we're interested in.
Yeah, I was just going to highlight, I think from a context perspective, we are providing the compute and the transport down to the company level. So every captain in the formation is going to have the capabilities where he can access the tools either in the cloud or resident locally on his edge compute to perform those functions that we can enable with those capabilities. So.
Thank you. Director Rose, what does a typical integration challenge look like from the Fuse perspective? Where do companies get stuck? Is the bottleneck usually on the network side, hardware side, or the interface between the two?
So just a little bit there with background with the labs. The labs are actually a good resource for some of these smaller companies, non-traditionals that are coming in that haven't integrated onto either Army platforms when you're thinking of a physical perspective or into the networks. For example, we have folks that are resident out at 4ID. We have folks that are resident out at 25th ID that are literally there to help with that prototype integration. So as folks are bringing in new technology, whether it's hardware, usually it's on that hardware side, they're kind of left seat riding with folks that might be from the prototype integration facility, in the case of C5ISR, who are actually helping them through, here's how you actually integrate this hardware to support everything we're talking about onto that Army system, be it a Stryker, a Bradley, or some sort of shelter, another system. Those are places where we've seen, and when I was with, I don't know, Colonel Shunky's over there, when I was actually out last year with USERPAC, I was fortunate enough to sit in one of the briefings where all of the units came together and they talked about, here's what we're learning from our exercises, whether they brought vendors in or whether vendors came in through an Army Fuse event. And I want to say 75% said we expended resources, we had folks out here, money and time, but we didn't have it integrated properly, so we weren't able to get the metrics and the data that we were looking for to see, is this the real answer? Does this really suit my need? So a little bit of time on that integration, and I say a little. The folks are out there in the dirt with all of you, integrating right there, trying to get this capability so we can speed things up and we can have actual metrics with the time that our soldiers are putting in and the time that you all are putting in coming out there.
Ma'am, awesome. When is a good phase in a startup to approach a lab like yours?
That's a good question. Can I give the government answer? It depends. Obviously, early is good. So we're not looking to bog down the process. We're not looking to slow things down. You know, risk reduction is a great thing, but we're out there. We're in the field. We want to get to that 80% solution and make it better from there. So the labs are there to help answer questions. Really easy to engage with. If you're having trouble engaging with the lab, reach out to me directly. I know I'm going to probably get a lot of email on that one, but we have folks here. I know Ms. Kim Getko was here earlier. She might not be in here right now, but the labs are out there and they're ready to engage early. I would say early is good.
I agree. So I think if you're a startup and you don't understand the Army, if you don't have one of those retired, warrant officers or somebody in your company who's been a green suiter, touching base with the labs, establishing a CRADA with a lab is a great mechanism for you to understand the Army, for the Army to share information that's not publicly releasable, either at the CUI or even at the secret level. So you can understand more about the architecture, you can understand more about the CONOP of how the unit wants to use it. Connecting with the lab, establishing a CRADA agreement. It's no commitment to buy anything off your solution, but it is a mechanism, it's an agreement that allows you to have communication with the government that's not open to everybody else. So if you're a small, innovative startup business, that's a great mechanism for you to understand more about the Army, understand the details that aren't just plain in the newspaper every day.
Thank you. I just want to save 5 minutes for the crowd to ask any questions. Last final question for anyone on the panel. What does a successful NGC2 look like from your perspective?
So I had to go back to it, but that fire mission, so General Ellis, after that fire mission went off, he made a great video of the old way of doing business, timed, and then the new way of doing business, timed, from the point of identifying a target, processing the target, getting airspace clearance for the target, and then shooting it. That, to me, is success. When the tools I can give the unit allow him to cut firing from tens of minutes to minutes or two, that's success. To me, that's what the tools that Next Gen 2 provides the commander, that to me is success. I need to do that in a lot more different warfighting functions, a lot more different use cases than that one, but that is the metric I say, if I can do that, the outcome of the tools I bought have made the commander's job easier, soldiers are going to live longer, expend less munitions doing it, that's a win for me.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I just say, if we can communicate more effectively now than we could a year ago, that's a win. And number two, if we're making decisions and operating faster than we were a year ago, that's a win. And every single year, we need to be going faster and faster and faster. And so, I think just to the point of, we're only automating so many things right now, and every single, I think really every month, that we're doing these exercises, we're trying to automate more and more and more. And so I think that's what success looks like.
I'll jump in too. So all the way down to the tactical edge, that's where things are really happening. And if I can go out next year to JPMRC and the reconnaissance unit doesn't have that paper map out, the really big paper map out, then I'm going to call that one a win, where they're drawing X's and O's. That's what I'm going to call a win, when that information is available to them and right back up to the mission planners too.
Awesome. We'll take any questions from the crowd.
First one has to be a softball.
It'll be about the only thing that people care less about than chemical weapons is training human beings. So I'm interested, you had merging operations and training up on there, and I'm interested to know what the appetite inside Next Gen C2 is to accomplish that. And would the Army be looking to go as far as something like a single pane of glass so that the system that you command on is the system that you train on?
Did he trigger you with single pane of glass? So, no, so I think what the integration is fundamentally, because Next-Gen C2 can be operated in the cloud as a primary, we can generate synthetic data in the cloud to stimulate that commander. You can have sergeants on sergeant's time Thursday morning using Next-Gen C2, doesn't have to schedule it, doesn't have to ask for a range. So he can operate in the training environment the same way he would operate in the field environment, not have to employ a bunch of resources. You can log into Next-Gen C2 from your personal laptop. It's physically possible to do that. There's some security parameters to get there, but so the barrier to entry of having to stand up a unique system just for training goes away because we're using same standard-based integration at the data layer, COTS tools for general purpose laptop and transport to get there. So I think that's where we'll start seeing the ability of units at the squad through the core level being able to use it day in, day out and not have to stand up a bespoke training event. So that to me is the win from the integration of the training with Next-Gen C2. No. I thought we were done.
There's no way.
Who wants to sell me some Next-Gen
Okay,
C2?
here we go.
Hi, can you talk a bit about, it's clear that you're taking a very open systems approach to Next-Gen C2. Can you talk a bit about how you're going to ensure that, that the government reference architecture is going to be able to stay that way? You're going to be able to plug and play systems across over time.
So fundamentally, I think the intent is, as we have the two prototyping formations, two different vendors going now, as we move forward into the continuous delivery model, the intent would be to both publish two things, the reference architecture, so you can understand both at the hardware and software layer what we are using, and then also publish the suite of standards we're going to use to do that, so what API, what formats we're using for et cetera. So that would be the intent. The challenge is that's releasable at the CUI level, so I can't publish it on SAM.gov, but that's the intent, is to get it out there. We use Joint Communication Marketplace, which was one of those links on my slide, as a mechanism to control access to the right players. But that would be the intent, is publish those, publish the CI/CD pipeline and how to access it so that industry can use that. So between the architecture being published and access to the pipeline, I think that's probably the best way I can do. But I will ask, if that's not the right way to do it, please let me know, because I have not been on the industry side developing things. I've never been a startup. So if there's something different that you need, please use those links and let me know what you could need, how I could do it better. But I think the intent is to get those published so that everybody can see them and build to them and become the next application the commander wants to use.
Bueller? All right, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions.
Hey, I'll just add one more thing if I can. We got 2 minutes, just real fast, just because we're talking, this is the demand forum and we're talking the Pacific. I would just highlight that NGC2 provides a whole bunch of different ways to transport data. Those work really well in in an environment where we're not super dispersed geographically. But as we go to the Pacific, it doesn't totally break down, but when we, the scale of having command posts separated by hundreds of miles, island to island, when fiber gets cut and, our low Earth orbit satellites are jammed, so Star Shield, Amazon constellations, we need other forms, other ways to transport a lot of data, high bandwidth data. And there's not a lot of ways out there right now. And so there are some companies working on some things, but I think that is an area, certainly of interest, I think, to not only the Corps, but the Army in the Pacific. That's it.
Thank you.